I think it's not just about the population of Arab countries, it's actually the population of most countries in the world. And the issues that make them vulnerable are incredibly diverse. You know, in some areas it is about economic deprivation. In other areas it's not about that at all. In other areas it's about just political repression. In other areas it's about, you know, family backgrounds, it's about history, it's about perspectives of the future. What I would argue is that there are two factors that I do think we can see sort of cross-cutting. The first one is where there are connections to existing networks, right? That's literally one of the very, very few things that you can say really does have any form of predictable quality, is if you have existing networks, then in those areas people are more vulnerable to be radicalized. Right? Just because ultimately it is about personal contact. Yes, propaganda is important, but ultimately nothing replaces the one-on-one contact that you can have. And the second issue that I do think is cross-cutting is sort of the sense that I think we have at the moment globally, where there's a question around this generation of youth and the next generation of youth, what is their life looking like? How do they see their own lives? I do think there's sort of a sense that actually there's a bit of a broken promise that our generation will not have as good a life as that of our parents. And I think that's an incredibly powerful question, a very destructive force. Because there is this sense, certainly since the middle of the last century, whereby every generation it gets better. It gets better every time. Every generation will have a better life. And I do think that is in question. It's in question globally. And those are then questions that can be exploited by extremists, not just Islamic extremists, but any form of extremists. You know, I do think the sort of rise of a populist right in Germany or in the rest of Europe is absolutely part of that, just as Al-Qaeda and Daesh are amongst Muslim communities. Well, I mean, where there's meaning lost, there's a vacuum that can be filled. And if one thing that, you know, the sort of groups like Daesh or Al-Qaeda are very good at is to create that system of meaning, to create an alternative system of meaning. It's about providing purpose, it's about providing meaning, it's about providing answers to the big questions that people have. And that's really what I think the sort of jihadi propaganda does in a way that is quite effective and that is very dangerous. And that's why I believe that, you know, focusing on countering this propaganda has to be at least as big a focus as the sort of, you know, military focus on defeating these groups, on not allowing them to seize territory, etc. So, you know, this question of the system of meaning is absolutely important. Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think there's a really important question to first look at is the question of counter-narratives versus alternative narratives. Often if we think of counter-narratives, we just get into this sort of back and forth of they say something and then we just tell everyone why they're wrong. And then, you know, and ultimately that doesn't get you very far. So I think the question of alternative narratives, of ways of addressing the system of meaning and dismantling it in a way that is not just about saying you are wrong, is very important. And I think in that, what are the values that we can focus on? Well, I mean, it's sort of going back to the values that our societies are built on and re-remembering them. It's about, I think it's about diversity, it's about, it's about freedom of thought, freedom of expression, but it also has to be about opportunity, it has to be about equality, etc. So I think there are loads of values that we need to focus on, that we need to re-remember and actually find a way to once again, you know, put them out there and be willing and enthusiastic about talking about them. I mean, there are enormous amounts of challenges. You know, there's the very immediate one, which is that they are now trained fighters who now have the sort of capabilities and expertise to perhaps launch attacks, etc. They have networks, so they are in contact across, they're building a global network, that they are linked to people for an exchange of ideas, exchange of expertise, etc. And then they are very powerful recruiting agents, I think, because like I said initially, there is that probably the most powerful recruiting tool is a one-on-one conversation, right? And if you are a foreign fighter who comes home with all the right stories to tell, then that is much, much more powerful to a, you know, to a potential recruit than it is to watch the most, you know, impressive video. So I think that those three elements, I'd say, are probably the main challenges.